All right, well, we're gonna change the meeting today from an official meeting to a workshop per Dan's recommendation, so I'm not going to ask for a motion to approve the agenda or the minutes, but I will ask if there's anything that anybody wants to add to discussion or take away from discussion for today. And don't hear any ideas, so we will go right into the, Sherburne County Housing Trust Fund discussion and action steps, which I assume Brian's going to lead us through.
Brian and I will tag team, but we'll let Brian kick it off.
Throw that PowerPoint up there. Yeah. Oh, that's a good point.
You have a clicker too.
Yeah. With a clicker work.
Pop it in.
No, you're good. Yeah. So just a continuation of that conversation for what our housing trust fund can look like and what different programs can be run through it. Clicker here, it's not responding.
You got the green on the side. There you go.
There you go, nice.
Every time she clicks off of the thing to let somebody in, she's gotta click back on the PowerPoint, otherwise Teams is active, so.
Okay, sounds good.
So if people keep jumping in, you'll just, it may stop working for a second.
Yeah.
Then just make sure you click on that screen again to make the clicker active.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, so looking at different recommendations first and then some action steps with that housing trust fund. Looking back at what the housing study recommendations were, so again, needing that full spectrum of housing choices for Sherburne County going into 2030 with an eye toward continuing new development of single-family and multifamily homes, rental, as well as age-in-place senior housing. Mostly on the active adult side for senior housing throughout the county. So again, their recommendations continue to build more multifamily housing, and that includes all the twin homes, townhomes, anything that's not that single-family detached home. More rental housing throughout the county. We have the need for it throughout the county. Looking to continue to have those ADU discussions and hopefully allow, and then continue to increase the platted lot supply were the main recommendations from the housing study. And so we're looking to have the county board pass our housing trust fund ordinance in January. I don't know if you wanted to add anything at that point. Okay.
No, we'll probably have a workshop, Rayanne and Andrew, the first meeting in January to go over what we discussed today. And then we'd have a public hearing later at the second meeting in January to actually create the ordinance, but we'll get through more detail of what that would look like as we go through today.
So today, and then today, hopefully having a conversation on what the recommendations we have for what we want our housing trust fund program to look like and what programs to actually offer through it. And then have the county board approve the program goals and then actually start reaching out to the community and letting the community know about our housing trust fund and whatever programs we start with it. So that's kind of the short-term goals here.
So here's what the ordinance looks like. It is very broad. You can see it provides loans and grants to properties owners, homeowners, local units of government, for-profit, non-profit, developers, and it can be for a number of things. So we created an ordinance that's very, very broad, and then it'll be the EDA's responsibility to narrow those down and bring that program to the county board for approval. And so like I said, we'd either have a public hearing in late January or early February, depending on how the conversation today goes and how it goes with the county board. There are some income guidelines, and we'll get through that as we move here too. Next slide, Brian. So some important definitions in the ordinance itself is what is a project. It basically has a lot of different options, whether that be single-family, multifamily, and rental, owner-occupied. So just know that we have a lot of flexibility with this program as far as what it can be used for. There is some income guidelines that might restrict how we use it, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And then who the recipients of the funding can be. Once again, very broad. Next slide. So they can be as loans or grants, and we'll start talking about the pros and cons in an upcoming slide here. But once again, very broad definitions of what they can be used for. I point out professional services costs. That includes permit fees, park dedication fees, things like that. So we might be able to lower some upfront costs for a developer to help keep those prices down. Obviously, we don't want that to go to them as profit. We want it to come back to the owners of the property so that we have lower prices and easier accessibility to affordability. Any disbursement over $50,000 would have to go to the county board. So we're gonna recommend that the EDA have authority to run the program, but if it gets to where one grant or one loan is over $50,000, it would go to the county board for approval. Next slide. Here is our current balance right now. It's $300,000. We would also apply for a grant once the housing trust is developed and officially passed. So that's why we want that ordinance passed first, so we can apply for that grant immediately. Those funds are tied up and grants are being accepted the first couple months in 2025. So we want to get that created, apply for that grant right away. We do have, half of that has no income limitations to how it can be used. So that's where we could use maybe a more flexible developer type funds. The affordability might be more of the grant, the reimbursable grants for people to fix up their home or to help with down payments, some gap financing, things like that. Those, half of that is state money that has very limited parameters on income, and you can see what they are there. And if we were to get that $150,000 grant from the state, it would fall into that category, unfortunately. But we can add funds to this at any time. When it's funding from the county board or from private donors, it would go into that top category that would have more flexibility. Typically, the $150 came from funding that we did not spend in years prior's budget. So if the county overall is under budget, we could potentially move some of that savings into this program, and that'd be obviously a discussion we'll have at the county board in January. And I know a lot of people are online. Please jump in if you have any questions as we go through this. So next slide. And then I'm going to turn it over to Brian for some of the programs that other counties are running right now.
Yeah, so we did a lot of research statewide as to what other counties have housing trust funds established, what they're doing with them. And as Dan mentioned, there's a wide range of what you can do with these programs. I pulled up a few that were both local and also ones that actually had a robust housing trust fund established. It's interesting, most counties have their ordinance passed, but not their program started. So they're very close to where we're at, just a little bit further ahead. But so looking at Stearns County, what they're doing is they're actively working on applications to start a program that will be a new construction deferred loan with a 3% interest up to $750K. So that's the main program that they're going to be starting with, and they're in the process of working through what that application is going to look like. Benton County, their main focus is on rehabilitation loans because their housing stock is older in Benton County. So they are focusing just on that rehabilitation, and theirs will be actually administered through a third-party financial to be able to administer that. Both Ottertail, Hubbard, and Chisago were interesting because Ottertail actually runs theirs through their HRA, and Ottertail ended up using a lot of their ARPA funding for this as well, so they have a big pool to work with. So if you look at Ottertail's Housing Trust Fund online, they have a range of different programs, and it all kind of lumps into their Housing Trust Fund, but that's because they're deciding to lump everything under this umbrella. But again, that's administered by a full HRA staff. Similar as Hubbard County and I believe Chisago, so that's both run through their HRA, kind of a full staff working on these different programs. So most closely to us is more that Stearns County, Benton County, where we want to limit to something that we can actually run in-house or manage. This is Chisago County. One thing that they offer that we wanted to highlight was that they offer grants. And just because they worded it so well, read it word for word. It's available to projects that can clearly identify that the project would not happen but for the grant. This may include, but is not limited to, demolition costs, poor soil conditions, additional municipal requirements, etc., or are for very low income. So we, kind of based on that, set up a little grid of what some of our options can be. So we have the left column grants, right column loans. Obviously for grants, they're a little bit easier to administer. We can run that in-house. I can be, myself and Dan, the main administrator. Wider range of projects to be able to fit under that. Yeah, kind of easier to set up, easier for applicants. Obviously the con is, since it's a grant, we're not really getting that funding back. The loans, the pros is that it can help fund larger projects, and as a loan we get those funds back over time. But the cons is we would need to probably contract with a financial administrator and have more of an operation side of it. It's a little bit more complex to set up and run. I'm not sure if you want to throw anything else in there, Dan.
No, and there's two types of loans. You could do forgivable loans, which are a little easier to administer, but once you start putting interest when they pay it back, it becomes a little more complicated, and maybe Andy, you could help us with that. But as we have internal staff, a lot of these programs that do loans have much larger staffs than we do. They use their economic development regional partners, where we don't have that 7W district set up yet, that we're working towards that, but we don't have that luxury that a lot of other counties have.
And from my understanding too, we can start with one program and we can always grow it out into further programs down the line.
What's the benefit of doing a loan and getting money back? Is it just to keep circulating it, or?
Yes, yeah.
Because grants, it's just out and you're
It's
done.
out, you don't get it back, right?
This would be, so looking at our recommendation, would be that reimbursable grants to fund and offset the housing fees, costs, and requirements for new construction and rehabilitation. So again, offsetting or looking to grant fund their park dedication fees, sack and whack fees, demolition costs, permitting fees, poor soil conditions, or down payment assistance. There's just a few examples, but we can be flexible with the grant side of it if we went with grants.
So think of it this way also, we provide the grant to the developer or the homeowner. If we were to pay the permitting fees or the park dedication fees, that money would go back to the municipality. So you're helping the homeowner and you're still providing some revenue for the local government. So that's one thing we can keep as an option. And then the thing I like too is down payment assistance. It's gap financing. A lot of people want to buy a home, but they don't have that down payment. So that's something we could look at too, is providing that gap financing for individuals.
How does that work on the mortgage side? Typically, they frown upon, from my experience, you have to have that cash available for a certain amount of time, and, you know, it can't be injected. It kind of raises some red flags if you get 10 grand injected into your account the day before closing on your.
It'd be simultaneous at closing. So the grant would come, in a situation like this, the funds would come at closing as part of the cash down.
And banks won't have a problem with that.
No. My only thing with the down payment assistance is I would not want to duplicate something that Minnesota Housing Finance Agency is already doing. So Minnesota Housing Finance Agency does already have first-time home buyer down payment assistance, where they will do some of that gap financing.
How often do you see that on loans?
It depends on the lending institution. So there are certain institutions that specialize in this, and they will probably run every single one of them through that.
Okay.
It's having that contact with the lender that will go through the Minnesota Housing Agency. I know it's changed because I used to work at Minnesota Housing Agency way back in the day when I was in college. And we would get allotted X amount of funds, and then you would have all the lenders calling in to reserve their funds or lock their rates. And that money, I mean, the phone would go nonstop. All these lenders, like at the time Wells Fargo and all these other companies were calling into getting that assistance. I was just looking here, so first-time home buyer, their program guidelines, income limits up to 142,800. Housing priced up to 659 in the 11 county metro, 604 in the other counties. Down payment and closing cost loan options with amounts totaling up to 53,000. Minimum credit score, owner occupant requirements. At least one borrower must complete the approved home buyer education course before closing on the loan.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Andy, is that something that, most of your realtors are aware of that, cause a lot of times your first time home buyers are so green to knowing how all this works. How do they get connected? Is it usually through the realtor?
A lot of it's through the lender. Because a lot of times realtors are taught that they should not intermingle in the mortgage part of it. What they'll be told is, refer them to some lenders and let the lenders explain the mortgage process to the potential buyers.
So do you see at times there might be a disconnect between the funds that could be available to a first time home buyer if they don't make a connection with the right lender that is involved in those programs?
Yeah, especially if they're going through a mortgage broker and not necessarily a bank lender.
So maybe education could be a factor. I don't know how we could move the needle on that, but maybe that's something to look into as well. How many people are aware that they have an opportunity?
Well, it's the education. I agree 100%. It's the education and it's the, having the contacts with the lenders that specialize in this.
So maybe we could be part of that conduit.
I think that'd be a great way to do it, is to make sure, and it's one of those things too, is, it's the lenders that go through it, it's the MHFA stuff, first time home buyers. We, at American Heritage, we don't do the first time home buyer program. But we are one of the bigger fix-up fund lenders. So the fix-up fund is a little bit different, kind of the same theory. So the fix-up loan program are loans between $2,000 and $75,000, terms from 1 year to 20 years, fixed interest rates, no down payment required, little to no equity in your house required. Income requirements, there's certain programs that do have income requirements and there's certain programs that do not have income requirements. And then they also have another program, it's an Energy Loan Plus program. So that provides loans from $2,000 to $30,000, secured or unsecured loan options. Loans from 3 years to 20 years, fixed interest rates, no down payment, little or no equity in their home, no prepayment penalties. So we actually advertise this one a little bit more too, because what happens is, say someone's AC and furnace go out. They just bought the house, maybe they used a USDA rural housing, so they financed up to 100% or a VA loan, so there's no equity there. As long as they're going to energy efficient furnace and AC, you can do an unsecured loan for that. And then Minnesota Housing carries all of the servicing of those transactions. So how it happens at our bank is we will work with MHFA to underwrite the loan. It's a very simple process. Close the loan, and then we sell servicing rights to Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. And then they will handle it from there on out.
I have seen that a lot of counties, EDAs and HRAs will list these state housing programs, almost as if it's the county offering it, but as soon as you click through, it gets over to the Minnesota housing. So We could to Commissioner Danielowski's point, we could probably list some of those as well, so that people know the full range of options.
And it's a loan, Andy,
It's a loan.
and they'd be in a second position then if it were ever to foreclose.
Yep.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Rand, were you done?
Yes, go ahead, Andrew.
When we started going through this, in my head, I was primarily thinking of this as a loan program, not a grant program.
Okay.
So two quick questions. One is, if we do it as a grant program, how do you foresee replenishing the fund itself?
Well, like I said, that's the issue. We would find one-time funds to put into the account. So there definitely is advantages, like we mentioned on that chart, to having a loan fund because it does come back. So that is a good point, Andrew, is that we would have to find other sources to help keep that balance up.
So the other point of discussion that came into my head as we were having this discussion is, if, like I said, originally I was just thinking of this as a loan program. I was not thinking of this as a grant program. So the other thing I think is worth discussing is, if it's a grant program, is that a different level of approval than a loan program? You know, the loan program, in my head, I'm fine with, the EDA administering that with the parameters that we talked about before. If we're doing grants, I'm wondering if those shouldn't go to the board. And that's an open discussion. I'd like Rhiann's thoughts on that as well.
When you say that, Andrew, I agree. I think the loan is what we were originally going into, and I think that's probably maybe where we should start. And I think we should explore the grant idea, because we can do both at some point, if I'm understanding it correctly, right, Dan?
Yeah, you could. Now, when you say loan, are you thinking 0% interest loan, or were you gonna add interest to that as well?
Well, I think, isn't that something that we should consider? Because my concern is $30,000. Is that really going to move lot development? Is that really going to, it can help a single purchase, obviously, but is it really going to move a developer that is looking at possibly buying a piece of property? And to my understanding, a lot of the costs that a developer bears, it's that holding cost that is always that issue, because that's a big investment to put all front loaded usually, and waiting for your project then to develop and sell your lots to get your money or to get your investment back, and then hopefully a profit.
And I think, the balancing act that I'm thinking through in my head, obviously, everybody likes free money. Everybody likes grants. So I think, there's obviously, those are going to be attractive to whoever's going to receive them over a loan. But by the same token, if we do grants, we could deplete the fund. Loans make the program sustainable over the long haul. Grants run the risk of depleting the funds, and and then we constantly have to go find new sources of funding. So I think, and as you said, Dan, there's it becomes more complex if we're administering loans. There's more cost to it. But I guess if we're going to set this up, I want to make sure we're setting it up such that it's sustainable. It's not just a 2 or 3 year program. Then all of a sudden, the funds are gone. We can't find, other funds to go in here. And if we think about it, there's administrative costs to administer the loans, correct?
Correct.
But there's also administrative costs to constantly applying for grants to refill the trust fund.
True.
So I think we have to balance that as well.
Yeah. No, and I do not disagree. I think I think we should focus on the loan idea and be open to exploring where a grant could move anything for us.
So, Mr. Chair?
So looking at, as far as like the developer part of it, when we kind of thought about this a little bit, we would probably be adding, like if we're gonna do like a senior type development, try to do a 1 acre lot type of a thing, we would probably either try to use, if it was grant money, to probably add like a extra amenity, either like a pickleball court or like a trail system throughout the development. I think that's probably where, it's their, what do you call it? I mean, it makes it more desirable for somebody to live there. It makes it into a better development and a better community, I guess. And
But does that actually drive up the price because you have those amenities? So if I'm a home buyer coming in there and I see those amenities, doesn't it actually drive up the price?
I don't know. I think it would create more demand for it. I don't know that. if
I'd
it's
say
gonna-
demand would increase the price, not the.
So. But as far as us coming in for a $30,000 loan or a $50,000 loan, we wouldn't do that, I guess.
Like, as a developer, it'd just be nice if you could put
Right,
amenities.
right.
Yeah,
It helps out because probably sometimes that's not gonna happen then,
no,
unless we,
not unless you have to,
yeah.
yeah.
Mr. Chair. On that point too, so Stearns County, their loan, a little bit more information about their loan program for new housing production. It's it can go up to 750,000, and it's fully amortizing. I hate that word. In 5 to 7 years at 3%, but because it is through the Housing Trust Fund, they do have to have the caveat that any new construction fits within that 115% of the AMI, the average median income of Stearns County. So when we have these conversations with the developers too, we will probably have to link any loans to not going over that 120% AMI for homeowner construction. And if it's rentals, the state caps it at 80% AMI for rental housing. So the housing study put our AMI countywide at a little bit over 100,000. So that's kind of the range for our AMI countywide. But these programs, when we start looking at the bigger loans, do get capped by the state to make sure that the end product does fit into that affordability bracket that the state has outlined.
And that's for half of the money that we have at this point.
Correct.
Yeah, that's true.
All right.
And
So
probably 2/3 once we get that grant.
Sure. So back to the edge.
And Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
sorry, one thing. I was just gonna say that, even at a, interest between 1 and 3, I'd have to say that that probably is, attractive as well, for a builder. I don't know where interest rates are at for, when you go into a development project, but I'm assuming they're greater than 1 to 3. And maybe I shouldn't assume that.
Yes, they are greater than that.
Okay, so that would be attractive, I would think.
So a couple of thoughts going back to the educational part. Getting the information out is always a good thing, obviously. However, as Andy alluded to, there's a lot of programs out there that the consumer can investigate with their sources. So I don't want to become responsible for that. But that being said, that was brought up pretty heavily in the housing summit thing that we had here. And I believe Marissa from Sherburne State Bank stepped into, at that time offered with Jessica, I believe, to facilitate getting a kind of a one-stop shop list of everything that was available. So I don't think we followed up on that. So I think we could probably dust that off. And I'd be willing to talk to Marissa on that.
We know her well too, if you want us to be part of that conversation.
Yeah. see if she's still willing to do that. So that idea's already kind of been thrown out there, we just didn't have follow through with it. From what I'm hearing from discussion, I wonder if we don't need to look at this in two separate buckets, one for consumer and one for builder, because I think the programs are going to be significantly different on to what each of those people need. And I don't think we could write a program that's going to facilitate down payment assistance, let's say, or furnace fix, whatever for a consumer, and then, tie that in with what's beneficial to a developer. So we might wanna look at two totally separate things there. I agree with having a interest rate attached. I believe the consumer, the developer, they still have to have skin in the game. 1 to 3%, whatever, but, I still think it should be less on the grants and more on the loans. I think we can keep, something in there for grants for special circumstances that may come up, and I don't, which it may be very beneficial, but I would prefer to try to, design it with the loans in mind. As far as the offset of writing grants, we're gonna be writing grants regardless, okay? I mean, we're gonna always be chasing that money to fund this. So I don't think that offsets much cost, but I also agree with Andrew that, yes, we should, there again, this should be refilling itself. But also, like I said, I think people have to have skin in the game to facilitate that. I don't know if adding amenities to a project wasn't necessarily my focus here. My focus was on trying to reduce, let's say on the developer side, to offset some of the upfront costs, as Rayanne alluded to get some projects going. The marketing of their project is kind of on the developer or the builder. And adding amenities, our housing study says that the demand's there regardless if, the demand's just there, we need rooftops. And I think that's where my focus would be, is how can we get the most rooftops, rental or
Mr. Chair,
yes.
just one other quick thought, Dan, and I don't know if there's anything here or not, but I really like the idea of dividing the program into a consumer program and a developer program. And one thing that came to mind as we were talking through this, I don't know if there are fees controlled by the county that could necessarily be set up as waiverable, toward developers or something that would have any kind of impact or not. That we wouldn't necessarily have to have, actual dollars for. It's just fees that we could waive as part of this program. Just something to think about. I don't know if there's anything that's substantial there or not.
We have done that before in some developments where we're gonna do this, but you'll need to waive the park dedication fees. We did that in Livonia once.
So that was an option, is this would help pay for those, or the permitting costs we
Right,
could
I mean,
waive.
it would be if the county would, obviously Livonia, they take their own park dedication fees, but, I think we tried that in Orac as well, to get them to waive that because they don't use any of their park dedication fees. But it was something with the county and that was not allowable.
And if they weren't waived, we could use this fund to pay them to the municipality too.
I think that was the point, that instead of waiving those, which can cause a little bit of a discussion, these funds would be used to pay them. So in essence, the county's still waiving them, it's just through this fund, correct? Is that
Yeah,
what?
yeah. And it wouldn't just be the county, it would be paid to the city if the development was in the city too.
Right.
Yeah, so you kind of recycling it in a little different way, yeah.
Yeah, it's red cup, blue cup, unfortunately, but some of it's just how you do this.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes,
one of the things we have to keep in mind is when we would be doing lot development and putting houses and rooftops, as you referred to them, that would also be increasing the taxable value because you would be creating property tax versus, with a house on it versus bare land tax. So that's something to consider as well. I know that when we waive fees, um, fees usually are paying for the department, planning and zoning, so to speak. So there's always, that there's a cost to it, but when you can put the value of an improvement on a lot and take it from bare lot tax to housing property tax, you're going to, be ahead.
You could also focus on infrastructure. If you have to put a road in, we could help with those costs as well.
that's more where I was focused, this on the development side, is those are the sack and whack.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
Dan, I wanna ask you, so at the end of this meeting here today, what are you looking for from us? Should you want, are we looking at specific programming guidelines? Where do we wanna end this?
Well, you can see why a lot of counties created the ordinance and don't have a program in place yet. There's a lot of complexities with this. So I guess I would look for direction to go to the board, get the ordinance created, which allows the broad use of these funds.
Well, let's start there then, but we can't, we need a motion for that, right?
We're not, well, I suppose you are recommending the ordinance itself, but consensus-wise, you could have, we're just going to a workshop in,
Sure.
Get the
So,
board.
well, let's start there. I've been through the ordinance. Does anybody have any issues with the ordinance, the way it's written and will be presented to the county board? If not, would there be a consensus from all participants here that this should be presented to the county board?
I had nod.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah. Head nod, yes.
All right, so we got that off the table. You can present that then.
yeah, and then today we're generating ideas. We narrow it down and we'll bring back more, a narrower focus in January. And then we can determine if we're ready for a public hearing to set those parameters, or we keep weeding it down to where it's.
Okay.
If it's a loan, I really wanna talk to Andy about how we could set that up. And if it's infrastructure, I'd really like to know what average costs are, if you need to put a road in with sack and whack. So Todd, I might need your help on that. But that's how we could keep narrowing it down and.
Yeah, and I think the consumer side of it would be a much easier program to set up. And so maybe we should take the low hanging fruit and get a win here. Set the parameters for that as to what the loans would be available for, the paybacks and stuff like that. That should be done I think relatively easy. The development side, builder side might take a little bit more thought process.
Makes sense.
Maybe that's a year two type thing with the fund build up a little bit more.
Right.
And once it's moved to the housing trust fund, the state considers it spent. So we don't, it has to be spent by the end of 25. But transferring it to the housing trust fund, the state considers it spent and we can distribute it whenever.
Continue adding to it as
Continue
well.
adding it and distribute it when we have a program up in place, so.
These aren't monies we're splitting with HSA, is it, or is this?
There's 150,000 we get each year. 75 is going to HHS for emergency loans. That's more your rent, I need food, things like that, where the other 75 is going to the EDA for housing.
And for the 150 that's going to Health and Human Services, we aren't concerned with that. That's not gonna hit this fund. That gets taken out. of the
Completely
top rate.
separate, the board has approved that money. Actually, Big Lake forwards that money to the county and we run a program for Big Lake as well, so that's completely separate from this.
Okay.
Because the money can be used for both ways, so we've decided to split it 50-50.
But we don't have to be concerned what loans they're offering
Nope.
for emergency service.
Nope.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes.
in going forward, I totally agree with, exploring the sack and whack fees and the road costs.
I knew you would.
I think, but, well, and to Dan's point, I think you need to really reach out to every entity. Every entity is different. It all depends on what their infrastructure investment is, as to what that sack and whack fee is gonna be. Roads, pretty much, it would depend on, are they gonna require this width or that width? So they can be somewhat different. So I think we need to have a better understanding of what each entity is charging a developer to come in and develop,
Well,
if that makes
I would,
sense.
Just play counterpoint with you, Ann. I know I've never done that before, but
Oh heavens, I'm not used to that.
why would we invest the county's manpower into that? Why wouldn't the developer come with that information? On an
Well, and yes, and I'm not saying that they wouldn't, but we need to, I think, have somewhat of an idea as we're exploring, or as we're setting this up, what kind of dollars would we be looking at being asked for to offset those costs?
I would think that, if the developer's doing something, say in Orac Township, and he comes in for she comes in for a loan, they would have the road costs or whatever they're looking for to offset. I don't know if we're going to gain much by trying to get ahead of that, other than, and I could be wrong, everybody chime in, but, I'm trying to see where that information would be relative here.
Well, I guess I'm just thinking that with each entity being somewhat different, I mean, if it comes in out of Big Lake, higher than what we've assumed every other entity, it might make a difference into whether we'd be able to help or not.
Todd, let me ask you this question. If we would give you 50,000 up front to help with the road sack and whack, once the lot's sold, do you think developers would be willing to put a portion of that back into the county housing trust fund? If it was part of an agreement, that once 50% of the lots are sold, the county gets 50% of the upfront comes back?
Possibly. I mean, it's just gonna depend on how much is there, I think. I mean, if it's $30,000, I don't, it's gonna be a lot more paperwork than what we're probably, just to have that short period of time of money to.
Just to have that on your books
Yeah, it
too.
doesn't.
I agree with that one.
Okay, just a thought of how we could keep the fund going.
Things are cloudy enough when you've got multiple finance sources, and then you start grabbing down in the middle bucket, then it gets a little
All right,
bit weird.
just spitballing.
Yeah. The other thing too is, I don't know if we were gonna be looking, like, if we're doing loans, obviously, we wanna make sure that they're, somebody that's gonna be able to go the distance with it as well, that's gonna be part of it, to make sure that they're gonna.
Yeah, and that's part of the
get money,
complication is we would need somebody helping us with that background.
Yeah.
Well, and I think through this program, you're right, qualifying is important, but the one benefit we have here is I think we have maybe wider parameters, or willing to take a little bit more risk than, say, a bank will, in this case. I think that's just what we're here for, is a little bit more flexibility or, things like that. So yes, I think they have to be credible, but maybe we don't have all the boxes that it would take to qualify for, $1 million,
Yeah, because almost every, even a smaller development is gonna cost over $1 million, so
Right.
$30,000,
Yeah.
$50,000 doesn't really move the needle.
Right. Yeah, and that was part of my concern about actually getting lot development. That 30,000 is probably gonna be okay for, one lot, maybe to help, but in regards to, I was just assuming that would really not be helpful to a developer, this working on developing a larger area for more lot availability.
But to Todd's point, maybe that's something that we look, year 2, 3, 4, 5, as this fund builds up, to be able to actually help the development side. I mean, we can still write programming for it, but
Yeah.
we have to face the reality.
Agreed.
Of the funds that are beneficial to the developers.
Yeah.
Which,
And if we're ready, possibly, there could be, who knows what could be coming down the pike to help move, housing and spur the growth. You just don't know. And at least it sounds like we could be ready for
that'd be
any
called a
opportunity.
depression, Ariana.
Don't say that word, Ken.
Well, you did, I did.
I have a question.
I didn't say depression. I said opportunity.
How would this work for someone that has like a house that needs major improvements? You know, we got downtown Elk River, we got cabins around the lakes, we got, you know, older housing. How would that work if someone's like, I need a roof, but more than just shingles, I need to like replace that whole thing? Is that something that they could apply for and tack it on their taxes, or?
Seeing something like that, Minnesota Housing has the product for it already.
I feel like this program is just doubling
Well, that's
for
what,
the resident.
and I think from the consumer side of this, I think we need to find out exactly what Minnesota Housing offers, what programs they have, take a look at their fix-up fund, their energy loans, and see if there's anything they're missing. Then this could supplement what that program does not have. Because again, I don't know why we would want to create a loan structure, the servicing, all of that stuff, when that's already provided by the state.
So we could work with their caps, their restrictions, things like that, and see if we can come in and, you know, add on to that where, okay, they've got a cap through income, you know, or people maybe that don't qualify for the income requirements, could come here, or.
Yeah, my position would be, I would like to see the underwriting guidelines for all the MHFA loans. And then everybody here can see what that is. So we all know exactly what is already available. And then take a look and see, is there anything that they're missing that county residents could benefit
That's
from?
one is,
Does the state have anything for septic systems? Like, the county has loans and grants for upgrading septics. Does the state have anything that?
I don't know if that would fall under the fix-up or not.
That's a really well-run program for residents. Those are expensive.
Agreed.
Yeah, I tried referring someone, but it was commercial.
And that program goes through planning and zoning? Yeah.
How do you do credit back?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Rand.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll wait.
I was just gonna ask Mitch, how the septic program, how do you do financial, how do you know they're gonna pay it back?
The taxes.
Okay, so it's a special assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, a few years back, the city of Big Lake got a, pot of money through the state in regards to, you had to have like an area that was, under the median income, had to be the low income, to help with people to put new windows in their house. It had to be an aging housing stock. And we really struggled to get people that would be interested in doing those improvements to their homes. And I think when you're dealing with someone who is already of lower income, to give them money that they're gonna have to pay back, they're not always there to jump on it. Just an observation for when the city did that.
so the septic assistance is not assessed to taxes, correct?
The loan part, yeah.
Yeah, so is that something we should look at here since that's already in place, and would that save some of the administration if, on the consumer
Could,
end?
yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
And that way it's one and done, and then it's handled through the auditor, I assume.
Yeah, Bruce, do you have any thoughts on that?
No. I mean, I think we've got right, I don't really have strong thoughts.
I don't know the full details of it. I mean, Jillian in our office, you could talk to her and.
Yeah,
Lynn.
when you mentioned it, I do recall that it is a special assessment, so if they don't pay taxes, the home gets foreclosed on, so there's some guarantee you're gonna get the money back.
I can, Otter Tail County offers a program for emergency repair for failing systems. So they do a loan, I don't have the interest rate, but it's a loan that the homeowner does have to pay back, but if they pay back and make their timely payments, after 10 years, and if they're still in that same home, the rest of the loan is forgiven. So that's a program that Otter Tail does run. Just
I
to-
know there's a grant and a loan for the septics. I just don't know the specifics on both of them. I don't administer them.
That fix-up fund does include septic. So the eligible projects are porches and decks, bathrooms, kitchen remodels, basement refinishing, windows and sidings, insulation, roof, tree removal, trimming, septic repairs and replacement, mold and radon mitigation, garages, home additions, accessory dwelling units, and more. So again, my thing is I don't think it'd be wise for us to sit here and try to come up with programs when there are already established programs that are offered.
So through that information and, we get the actual information, but that could kick the consumer side right out of the room where we're not dealing with consumers because that's taken care of by the state. Now we can focus solely on development and building and.
But that's why I wanted to see how our program with the septic works with the state, if they have that, and we're offering, other improvements, so.
Does the state have a set pot of money each year? Once it's gone, or is the
That I
revolving
don't-
keeping it going?
On the fix-up side, I've never heard of an issue with it, but I don't know. I know that, and again, when I'm referencing what the program was, that was 30 years ago when I was there.
Which state agency?
Minnesota Housing Finance Agency.
So we should also check the PCA, because I know they have grants for LSTS and community septic. I don't know about individual septic. Could be that we'd be doubling up on two agencies. I'll try to look here real quick.
I know for Minnesota Housing, for the other programs, the first-time homebuyer, they've been sending out emails as we come to the end of the year. They still have money in those pots too. So as of right now, their pots are pretty well funded. Not sure if that will change next year, but.
Sounds to me like there's a whole lot of money out there, free money. Maybe we should just lower some taxes with this and call it a day. Sorry.
And that's usually the problem. There is this money that is out there. It's getting people educated to know how to apply for it.
Right. Yeah, your point's been very well made now through the roundtable here that, even, a lot of people probably just aren't getting the information.
Do you want to go through the rest of the slides and then
Sure, absolutely.
we'll have a wrap-up conversation?
So just the rest of the slides are kind of also looking forward into the future for, so in January, getting it approved by county commissioners, and then actually having me kind of present out to the county, to different individuals, a lot of different, I've had a lot of different realtors and people involved in the building community want like a presentation on the housing study. And instead of giving little presentations to every little community that wants it, really trying to put out a webinar so that people can refer back to it, put it on our county website for the economic development, and try and put the word out that way instead of doing a whole bunch of presentations. And then we have a lot of people wanting to have a second round of that housing summit too. So using our findings from the housing study as one of the presentations in another housing summit. And then hopefully by March, being able to present out that we do have this housing trust fund, and here's some of our first programs that we're either starting or you can actually start applying for. So really trying to get the word out in 2025 on what we decide. That really kind of wraps up this part of the presentation.
That housing summit was well attended.
It was, yeah, 90-some people. Yeah.
There's, I Most of my emails coming in are housing folks wanting to either have another summit entirely, because this conversation is very active, obviously, statewide.
I saw realtors, developers, I mean, there were just everybody involved in that was there.
Well, maybe that's the next step, is we create a survey and send it to our banking and realtor partners and see what are you struggling with? How can we help? Get the experts to give us an opinion of what they need.
And then
If you
present
send that
out.
survey out to lenders, it'd also be nice to see which ones offer the fix-up fund or the first-time assistance.
Yeah, I probably need your help with that survey. Same with you, Todd, your expertise in creating that. Is that a good next step, Ken?
I think that'd be great, and then, because that information would, go to, putting out the comprehensive thing that Marissa was gonna do if we knew which lenders did offer different programs, things like that, so instead of doubling up efforts with Marissa chasing down all of that, we'd have that through the survey. So I think that'd be very beneficial. I think the March timeline for kicking off the program might be a little aggressive, but.
Yeah. Gotta have goals or you don't meet them, so that's why I threw it out there.
My review's coming up, so yeah.
Is there a way that we could talk to maybe some of the cities too and just see who are the recent developers that were in the city?
Great.
To get some of them to get their feedback and maybe meet with one or two of them.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you'd meet with the ones that didn't have the development happen, so you can ask them why. You know, I mean,
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. Thank you, Ken.
where they take it so, they take it through, preliminary, but then they can't follow through. Well, what happened? What was the hang up?
I think we had one in Big Lake that had a lot of promise. It was off at 205th. Would have been one of the largest ones we've had in a while, and they just couldn't make a pencil. So that'd be a good one to circle back with. And I think that was, I want to say, was that Lennar?
No,
It wasn't?
no, who's out at Ealing Shores there?
Oh, and
Okay,
J.B. Brooks.
Kitty Brooks.
Yeah, it was J.B. Brooks.
okay.
Which I think they were maybe a little bit out of their element. It was kind of a stretch from their normal development, but. Yeah, and there again, we're not going to take out the fact that, developers still have to, it still has to work on paper. We're never gonna be able to compensate for that. And I hope that's not our goal.
Well, as Todd knows, you see the price of the land, you see the improvements, you see what you can get back for lots, and if it doesn't make sense, sell a lot.
Lot size is still the biggest determining factor as far as developability and profitability from a standpoint, so it's still, the load's still on planning and zoning at this point. When's your review coming up?
More so township, I think.
Do you wanna mention where you're at with the planning process and how we're speeding it up?
Yeah, we were gonna do a workshop or cannabis got moved up. We want to do something here soon for get people together for the planning process that we had talked about, potentially eliminating planning commission for the final plat. Again, that's only gonna help out developers that are doing infrastructure. Season's short, but I think we're gonna do, what is it? Not a workshop, what is that called that we had? Parking lots, all that.
What was the workshop called?
Yeah, we were gonna do something else, not a workshop, but something else.
Oh, a lean event.
Lean event.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were gonna do a lean event, but cannabis got moved ahead, so I think Mark is scheduling something for a lean event to get all of the departments together to see if it's feasible.
With the goal of having it ready by construction season, so
Yeah.
April-ish.
Because everything we've looked at, that's about as much as we can do is just bypass planning commission as long as nothing's changed. Can't do townships, I know you mentioned that, but they have to approve them.
Right.
So they still have to go back to the townships for final.
So it won't impact affordability, but it would allow you to get your project started
Well,
and making money quicker.
Definitely, if you miss out on a construction season,
Time
it's
is
very
one.
costly.
Yeah, so that is one we're moving forward. ADUs, we've drafted an ordinance. I can send it to you as well. I've sent it to the attorneys. We reviewed it, so that is one thing. I mean, the only thing we have to look at, it's gonna be easy for ADUs for larger parcels, but it's the developments. If the developers put restrictions on their covenants of one single-family dwelling, then we have to look at what can be amended if that development wants to allow ADUs, so it's not a one-size-fits-all for the whole county, so.
Good,
I think we have direction.
yep. Anybody want to add anything to, the housing trust fund discussion? So the takeaway is we're gonna collect data, maybe put out a survey to all potential participants or players in this. We're going to dust off Marissa to see if she can work on the marketing side to get information out. So those are, and then you're gonna bring this before the board, right? So those are the 3 action steps that we're leaving with?
That's what I have written down.
Okay.
Did we miss anything?
Well, I would say that's a successful meeting then. All right, moving on, EDA activity update.
Even though I have more than the usual 5 minutes, it probably only takes me the usual 5 or 10 minutes.
And I'll give you time and you don't want it.
No, it's pretty straightforward. Again, using the same format as each of the other months here, but, so looking at business retention expansion, did 9 business retention expansion visits, this past month. Really just trying to get a snapshot of many different types of businesses, continuing to get more inroads with the larger manufacturing, for their BRNE visits. I have Metalcraft scheduled in January. And really starting to visit and trying to hit all the different townships and the businesses in the townships too. So kind of what was going township by township, so really hit Haven Township pretty hard this last month. And just really going out to the businesses.
So what, is there a common theme that you're hearing from these businesses as far as good, bad, ugly? Are we gaining any useful information from them as far as how what we're doing as a county to support their business, or what can we do, or
I'd say it's
just shaking hands and having cookies?
no, we're trying to get that good information. So it does kind of break down by size and by industry. I'd say that for our manufacturers of any size really, it's having continued workforce, be able to be hireable, and the drive is to find workforce that is ready to learn the tools that manufacturing plant has, not so much go through formal schooling ahead of time. So taking that information and going back to our schools and our technical colleges, and trying to have those conversations, because it's interesting. A lot, you know, like J&J Machine, I think Metalcraft mentioned it, but if you get someone that has too much formalized schooling, it's actually a bit of a detriment they've been finding. So trying to have that conversation with the school districts and everyone else. On the smaller business side, so like looking at Snap Fitness, looking at Cambo Flare, looking at Pretty Paws. So these are either just your single owner things. They have more concerns, less at the county level and more just getting that foot traffic in, and fighting with their own leases and or their franchise agreements. So like the Snap Fitness, really having those conversations with them. So it is different. I would say, on the whole, 98%. It's been very positive that they like that the county cares about them as a business and just having a face to the name. And even folks, I worked with a business in Baldwin Township, Baldwin City soon. And when I first walked in, he was very like, oh, you're big government. But after I walked through the shop with him, just, he appreciated that we cared as a county, that he was there, and that we would want to see his growth. And there's been a few growth opportunity conversations that have come up. So coming into 2025, there's been a few businesses, which I won't really list off here, but that are looking to expand in 2025, and probably will have a conversation with us about the revolving loan fund.
We're actually meeting with one next week, so.
So it really is getting the word out. And yes, there is some glad handing there, but I'd say about 50% of the conversations end up either scheduling another visit that's a little bit longer, or just there, we end up going through a full visit. So I'd say it's one of the more beneficial things we're doing. And then on the other note I have here is that we're working closely with public health for a grant opportunity that's come through Department of Ag, and it's for any grocery store, convenience store, anyone that's selling food in our county, to give them more infrastructure, so like their freezers, coolers, to sell healthier food options. And so working with public health, the only area of our county per Department of Ag that qualifies as a food desert is that southeast side of St. Cloud, the 315 census tract. And so one of the only convenience stores there is this River Station. It's the little convenience store. It used to be River Station Gas and Tobacco. But working with public health and working with them to have that convenience store owner actually apply for that grant. So the convenience store owner themselves will actually apply for that grant, but we're allowed to provide basically technical assistance on helping to write that grant. So their application window is the middle of January, so just been meeting with them off and on to make sure that they are well prepared with their grant application, and probably eventually putting a letter of support their way, and just being a helpful assistance to them. So that's been nice too.
Could I just ask one question? So just thinking about the foot traffic thing and that, and like this housing fund and that, is there a way that we could, like as a board, like, okay, you have a problem with foot traffic, can we get hooked up with like some marketing company or something like that to go in and say, hey, these are maybe some of your places where you're lacking at, and maybe even give them some funding type of a thing to try to get them to see that, okay, if you market it this way, maybe you would get some more foot traffic coming in.
What businesses were lacking foot traffic?
Really the ones that rely on the foot traffic. So some of, like there's a gift shop in Becker that just started up, and they're struggling to have that foot traffic. So those types of businesses that do rely on people actually coming in. A little bit, some of the coffee shops, and they mentioned the foot traffic side of it. But yeah, it's the businesses that rely on people just stopping and coming in.
But sometimes they have to not worry about what's gonna be walking along the street. They have to get out to the, Facebook or learn how to do that type of thing to say, hey, we're doing this today, and they make some weird video and people start showing up.
I will say on that side too, sorry, I lost my train of thought. We have had a business go through our business lab. So the business lab, part of that business consulting is that website design and help with that. So we have had at least one business go through that in the last month. So whenever businesses talk about their website or getting more marketing out, that's usually what I'm referring them to is our business lab. But that's a thought though, is to have something more strategic on the marketing side for them.
It would be nice to see, okay, we did this, you went into the business lab, and now 2 months later, what is the benefit that has happened?
I'll use Ember Coffee as an example. They went to the business lab 5 or 6 times and through the whole stage of their growth, including marketing. So that's a success story where they utilized it quite a bit and helped them grow their business.
And did they receive some sort of funding, or they're just getting ideas from the business lab?
They just got ideas, business plans, marketing strategies, things like that from the business lab.
All right.
And in the last month, I think it's on one of the other slides, I did meet with Switchboard, who was the company that started up our SherburneBusiness.com website. And that was one of the videos of a few of our businesses. So it was going to be a conversation to bring up in 2025 to the board is what do we want to look at for, do we want to do more of those types of videos with businesses to show and give them kind of free marketing. Part of it though was trying to figure out how much web traffic we were actually getting to that Sherburne Business website. Because if it's not getting that web traffic, then, but yeah, kind of that kind of conversation.
Maybe we need the marketing.
Yeah. So again, workforce development, kind of having those conversations between, after having BRNE visits with the businesses and figuring out what they want out of future employees, circling back with the schools, trying to get in with each of the school districts with mostly their CTE, their career technical education coordinators, to kind of give them the feedback from the industries, as well as trying to understand St. Cloud Technical College's offerings a little bit better. Did go up there and have some conversations with their, so SCTCC breaks it out into like 4 or 5 different schools. One of those schools being business, IT, and education, which that education piece kind of circles back onto the next slide. But for childcare as well, the workforce for childcare is still a significant issue in getting people that want to actually come to the childcare side. So all these conversations end up linking with each other, but trying to have those conversations with everyone.
Does the technical college and university, do they work closely together?
They're pretty good.
Programs?
From what I can tell, whenever I ask that same question to both of them, they say, yes, we work well with each other. I think they have a really good program for transfer credits from SCTCC to SCSU. I think that's been improved over the years. So they can kind of, both schools can boast that you can do your generals with SCTCC. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good working relationship between the two. And I do know that a fair bit of our students, I don't know the percentage, end up going down to Anoka Technical College as well. So we have Anoka Technical College and then we have SCTCC. Obviously the housing, that's been a main focus of ours. So pretty active participation with Centricare is doing these housing cohorts, and it's led by Kathy Parsons with Centricare. And Centricare is trying to do a big push out into the community from a community health perspective, and one of their focuses is on housing. So Kathy Parsons' groups out of Greater St. Cloud is kind of focused more on that Greater St. Cloud area, but that obviously does grab the Southeast St. Cloud for us in Haven Township. So keeping an ear on what they're doing, a lot of interesting thoughts coming out of that group. They're looking at like setting up almost a regional housing trust fund. They're looking at different models to have more of that pot of money for developers to come in. And again, they're looking at the development side too. But that is kind of focused on that Greater St. Cloud area. But we get the benefit of that Southeast St. Cloud and Haven Township a bit. And continuing to present out the housing study to basically as many groups as I can. And then obviously the childcare side, so we are still waiting to hear back from DEED on who actually earned the grant opportunity that they were offering on the childcare side. That's one where we did put that grant proposal to them. They're saying by the end of December here, so we'll see. It sounded like the coordinator of that grant opportunity, Tammy Wickstrom, she gave a presentation last week and said that there are about 60 applicants and about 20 are going to be earning that grant for childcare. So as soon as we hear back from them, we'll let you guys know. And then talking about summits into next year, really starting to think about putting together some sort of childcare summit, but specifically to bring both nonprofits and some of our smaller businesses into a large working group room to understand what our current childcare picture is throughout the county, as well as where we might be able to troubleshoot some solutions. And this was actually brought to me from 2 different nonprofits, Central Central Minnesota Mental Health Center and Bridges of Hope. We finished up a chamber meeting and they approached me and said, I know you guys have put on summits before, let's put on a summit for childcare and the lack of childcare and how we can come up with some of those solutions. So kind of brainstorming with them, starting to bring in a few more partners. Just had a conversation with First Children's Finance, and they'd be okay with presenting out countywide information at something like that. We did bring in the Central Minnesota Community Foundation as well. They're interested. I think Greater St. Cloud Development Corporation would be interested, Initiative Foundation. So bringing together some partners to present out the overall information about where our child care picture stands, the differences between family and centered child care and special child care licenses, and then actually having some working groups with the different business leaders to see what are some ways that our businesses can get involved with solutions. And that's the part that we're kind of brainstorming right now as to actually how that would be beneficial to come to something like this.
Is it possible?
Mr. Chair?
1 minute, Rand, go ahead. Todd.
Could we possibly maybe look at putting that part of our housing fund? So if somebody wants to add on to their daycare, maybe we could grant, that would be a good, maybe some good grant money that could be used there.
We'd have to tie it to housing in some fashion.
Housing children.
If it's,
That'd be more of a revolving fund.
Yeah, we do have a revolving loan fund.
Yeah, that might fall into.
We actually did that in Elk River here, Egan Properties. We did a revolving loan.
Okay.
But I don't know how we could tie it to the housing trust fund.
Yeah, just to try to get some more space available, I think that's maybe part of it.
And workers, a lot
Yeah.
of them have space, they don't have the workers to occupy that space.
Go ahead, Madam Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also, it's my understanding that, Minnesota Department of Health is getting ready to roll out, phase 2 of what they're proposing to, change for the rules and regulations, to get a license for childcare. So that is still out there. It hasn't been released yet. And this is, Dan had let me know this here a few days ago, so stay tuned as to see what part 2 is going to look like that will impact that industry. So that's still a very active conversation. They didn't go away, they're coming back. And also in regards to the childcare issue and shortage, along with trying to get people to go into providing childcare. When we're talking about the housing component, sometimes it's being able to secure a house or buy a house that can be an impediment to being able to provide in-home daycare, because the cost of housing, is up there. So maybe there's a way we could maybe look at it that would provide an opportunity for someone who's interested in opening up in-home daycare to get access to being able to purchase a home to do it in. Just a thought.
and have been trying to look at different models of bringing together that housing and childcare. There are some other models out there which I can present more on later, but about some of these larger developments like apartment complexes that have a portion that is dedicated for on-site childcare and has, during the building process, working with the licensor to make sure that it's fitting all the requirements for childcare. So there's ideas like that out there too, for sure. And the city of Becker is still working through their Rural Child Care Innovation Program with First Children's Finance. So still myself and Jody on the Health and Human Services side are pretty involved with that too. So if they are starting to get a little bit closer to coming up with actual actionable items to get more childcare in the city of Becker. When we start to see those, I'll present those out to the group too as thoughts for maybe replicating that in other parts of the county. And then on the marketing side, did meet with Switchboard talking about that SherburneBusiness.com. Did get access to be able to start manipulating that website. I'd like to figure out a way to put on a tracking on that just to see what kind of web traffic we are getting currently And then if we start making changes, have a before and after, so we can see if it's making any change to web traffic, or if we even want this site at all. The videos on it are very nice, but using it to the best of our abilities.
How can you get it out to more people? Because I like the videos, I like hearing the stories,
great-
success stories of working with the county, and
It's a great question.
we can spotlight that gift shop in Becker, and, you know, but it's just getting people to see it.
It's a nice landing page for everything, and it's set up really well. And yeah, if we could use this as a marketing tool, that would work out well.
The cost of the videos have really increased. You're looking at almost $4,000 a video now, so what, you know, we really have to have a return on investment for the videos.
You got an iPhone, right? Just
Yes. So Josh and Brent with the city of Elk River, and I think they're actually, Brent's on this call, but they do their, I forget what it's called. They do a spotlight video for businesses in Elk River. So we can reach out to them and see how they're marketing their videos and see if,
So we're looking for marketing to market our marketing.
right, yeah, that's an issue too. And if the city of Elk River is already doing it, you know, seeing what the different communities are doing to market their own businesses. And just continued participation with the chambers. I am now a Becker ambassador, Big Lake ambassador, and then maybe was nominated for the Becker board, chamber board. So those will be announced in January, but continuing to just be involved with them. And then looking into first quarter 2025, as we've been talking about, really establishing the Housing Trust Fund, the trust fund programs, getting some of these summits set up for sometime in 2025, continuing those child care conversations, working with the Initiative Foundation to hopefully move forward on establishing that federally designated 7W Economic Development District. Looks like there's good movement on the Initiative Foundation side on that. So hopefully 2025 is a good year for that. And again, yeah, just having more conversations about marketing and what we'd want to do with that. And that's it.
Any questions for Brian? All right, looks like our next meeting is January 16th. And if there's nothing else, I'd look for motions.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
okay, I just wanted to give a real, brief, update. We had the, AMC, which is the Association of Minnesota Counties Annual Conference, last week. And I just wanted to, I am part of a housing subcommittee, with AMC, and just wanted to give you an update that we did have a presentation that was done. We were able to have a couple of people from Minnesota Housing come in and give us some update. One of the things that I found really interesting, or at least a phrase that I think really resonates our work with trying to promote housing, that housing impacts Minnesotans of all backgrounds in all corners of the state. Housing touches all areas of life, education, health, jobs, and more. So I think this is why we are exploring the opportunity to try to promote housing growth, and also presented some platform amendments. I brought forward a platform amendment, which means that this is something that AMC will work with at the legislative level to support policies, regulatory reforms, and judicious public investment to incentivize and promote housing options where market-only responses have failed, including affordable housing, accessible housing, workforce housing, and life cycle, starting with independent senior housing. That's one of the platforms that's going to be picked up. Also introduced a platform in regards to the need to support childcare investment, and that'll be picked up as well. The platform amendment speaks, AMC supports programs to improve access to and affordability of childcare services particularly family or in-home childcare, as well as reasonable regulatory reforms that improve child safety and well-being while not negatively impacting the viability of the child care industry. Those were the two platforms that I brought forward, and they were approved, so they will now be part of the discussion as we work with the legislative body. So I just wanted to give that update.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your efforts towards that. Dan, your thought?
I just want to acknowledge Molly Hanson. Today is her last meeting. She switched jobs recently, and it just doesn't fit into her schedule much anymore, but on the childcare side, she's really been a big asset. So Molly Ruby will be replacing her next year, starting in January. So thank you, Molly, for all you've done for us.
Thank you, Molly.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm happy to consult. We did a significant, so please Phil, reach out if you do the childcare summit. I'll stay in the loop or Molly can inform me, but we did a lot of research and we did a lot of data collection, and we also monitored human behavior, who said they would come and do daycares, but they don't want to pay for it either. And so we had some ideas about incentives for infants, et cetera. So I still live here. I'm still here. I just, my new role has taken me in a lot of different directions. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Molly.
All right, well, we don't need to adjourn, but we do need to be done.
Amen.